Some stories begin in a lawyer's office. This one begins on the steps outside one. It was a Wednesday morning in September. Kind of morning in Nashville, Tennessee that has not yet decided to be autumn. Warm still, but with something underneath the warmth that tells you the season is about to change whether you are ready or not. I had just walked out of the offices of Hartwell and Associates on Church Street with nothing. No inheritance. No explanation. No acknowledgement from my parents that I had even been in the room. My brother Marcus had gotten everything. The house in Brentwood. The investment accounts. The land in Williamson County that my grandfather had spent 40 years acquiring acre by acre with the particular patience of a man who understood that the best things are built slowly. All of it. Gone to Marcus. I was walking down the courthouse steps with my keys in my hand and my eyes straight ahead, the way you walk when you are holding yourself together in public and you need to make it to your car before you stop holding yourself together. And a man sitting on the bottom step looked up at me and said, "You are Earl Davenport's granddaughter." I stopped. He was maybe 65. Gray coat. Paper bag beside him. The particular stillness of someone who had been sitting in one place long enough to become part of it. He said it again. Not a question. A statement. "You are Earl Davenport's granddaughter." I said, "I am." He reached into the inside pocket of his gray coat. He took out an envelope. Cream-colored. Sealed. My name on the front in handwriting I recognized before I fully processed that I was recognizing it. My grandfather's handwriting. He held it out. He said he told me to give this to you after. He said you would know when after was. I took the envelope. I looked at it for a long time standing on those courthouse steps. Then I looked up. The man had picked up his paper bag and was walking slowly down Church Street without looking back. I never saw him again. But I will get to what was inside that envelope. First, you need to understand who my grandfather Earl Davenport really was, and what my family had been doing behind his back for the last 3 years of his life. My name is Joanna. Joanna Ruth Davenport Cole. I am 41 years old. I grew up in a small brick house on Elm Street in Franklin, Tennessee. My grandfather Earl lived 20 minutes away in Brentwood in a house he had built himself in 1974 with the help of 2 friends and a dog named Duke, who apparently supervised the whole operation and contributed nothing structural. He was a self-made man in the truest sense of that phrase. No college degree. No family money. He had started a small landscaping company in 1971 with a truck and a mower, and had built it over 30 years into one of the largest commercial landscaping operations in Middle Tennessee. He retired in 2001. He spent the next 22 years doing exactly what he wanted, which mostly meant driving around Williamson County in his pickup truck looking at land. Every Saturday morning of my childhood I rode with him in that truck. He would point at a piece of property and tell me its history. Who had owned it? What it had been? What it could be? He taught me to read land the way some men teach their grandchildren to read books. He said, "Joanna, land does not lie. People lie. Land just sits there being exactly what it is." I was 8 years old when he said that. I understood it better every year after. My brother Marcus was 3 years younger than me and had understood from an early age that our grandfather had money and that the best way to access that money was to be present and agreeable and laugh at the right moments. Marcus was very good at being present and agreeable and laughing at the right moments. I was not. I asked questions. I pushed back when I disagreed. When my grandfather said something I thought was wrong, I told him so, and we argued it out over the kitchen table, and sometimes he changed his mind and sometimes I changed mine, and either way we both respected each other more afterward. My parents preferred Marcus's approach. They had always preferred Marcus's approach. My mother said once when I was 16, "Joanna, you could learn something from your brother. He knows how to be in a room without making it difficult." I had thought about that sentence many times since. Especially sitting in Hartwell and Associates on Church Street that Wednesday morning watching a lawyer read my grandfather's will and waiting to hear my name and hearing Marcus's instead. Every time. Every single line. Marcus. And then at the end, one line. To my granddaughter Joanna Ruth Davenport Cole, I leave my love and my thanks for every argument we ever had. My love and my thanks. My father put his hand on Marcus's shoulder. My mother looked at the table. Nobody looked at me. I picked up my bag. I walked out. And on the bottom step of the courthouse on Church Street, a man in a gray coat looked up and said, "You are Earl Davenport's granddaughter." I sat in my car for 17 minutes before I opened it. Not because I was afraid of what was inside. 'Cause I wanted to be completely still when I read it. My grandfather had taught me that too. In the truck on Saturday mornings when we pulled over to look at a piece of land he was considering, he would turn off the engine and sit for a moment before he got out. I asked him once why he did that. He said, "Because you cannot see something clearly while you are still moving. You have to stop first." I stopped. I opened the envelope. Inside were two things. A letter. 4 pages. My grandfather's handwriting, smaller and shakier than the version I had grown up reading, but recognizable the way the essential things about a person remain recognizable regardless of what time does to the surface. And a document. Official. Notarized. Dated 11 months before his death. I read the letter first. He began it the way he began everything. Without preamble. He wrote, "Joanna, if you are reading this, you have just come from Hartwell and Associates and you have heard what I left your brother and your parents and you are sitting somewhere trying to understand why." He wrote, "I need you to understand that what you heard in that office is not the whole story. It is the story your parents wanted told. It is not the story I am telling." I looked up from the letter. Through the windshield, Church Street was doing what Church Street does on a Wednesday morning. People walking. Cars moving. The ordinary business of a city that did not know what was happening inside a parked car on its edges. I looked back at the letter. He wrote, 3 years ago your parents came to me with a plan. They said Marcus needed a foundation. They said he had made mistakes, the failed business, the debts, the 2 years he spent making decisions that cost everyone around him something, and that he needed the security of knowing the future was taken care of so he could rebuild himself properly. He wrote, they asked me to leave everything to Marcus in the official will. They said it was temporary. That Marcus would share with you once he was stable. That it was just a structure to protect him during a vulnerable time. He wrote, I want to be honest with you about something, Joanna. I considered it. Not because I believed your parents entirely, but because I loved Marcus too and I understood that he was struggling in ways that did not show on the surface. He wrote, but I am a man who reads land. And I told you once that land does not lie. People do. He wrote, so I did 2 things. He wrote, I signed the will your parents wanted. And then I went to a different lawyer. I turned to the document. It was a deed of trust. Executed 11 months before my grandfather's death at the offices of Morrison and Webb on 2nd Avenue in Nashville. Witnessed by 2 people I did not recognize and a notary public named Ellen Marsh. The trust was called the Earl James Davenport Irrevocable Land Trust. The beneficiary was Joanna Ruth Davenport Cole. The assets held in trust were listed on page 2. I turned to page 2. 14 parcels of land in Williamson County. I recognized every one of them. Every piece of property my grandfather had pointed at through the windshield of his pickup truck on Saturday mornings for 30 years. Every field and tree line and creek bottom and ridge top he had driven me past and said, Joanna, look at that. That is something. 14 parcels. Combined acreage, 412 acres. I sat with that number for a long time. 412 acres of Williamson County land that my grandfather had spent 40 years acquiring acre by acre with the patience of a man who understood that the best things are built slowly. None of it had ever been part of his estate. 'Cause 11 months before he died he had put all of it into a trust with my name on it. And my parents had never known it existed. I turned back to the letter. He wrote, your parents asked me to give Marcus the house and the accounts. I gave Marcus the house and the accounts. They did not ask about the land because they did not know how much of it there was. They knew about some of it. Not all of it. He wrote, nobody knew about all of it except me and the lawyer at Morrison and Webb and a man named Joseph who has been sitting on the steps of that courthouse on Church Street every Wednesday morning for 4 years because I asked him to and paid him to be there and told him to give this envelope to my granddaughter after the will reading. He wrote, Joseph is a good man. He fell on hard times 8 years ago and I hired him to do odd jobs around the property in Brentwood and we became friends the way people become friends when they spend time working beside each other without needing to explain themselves. He wrote, I told Joseph everything. He is the most trustworthy person I know. I knew he would be there. I knew he would find you on those steps. He wrote, Joanna, I need to tell you something about the land before I tell you what to do with it. He wrote, every piece of that land I bought thinking of you. Not Marcus. Not your parents. You. 'Cause you were the one who rode in that truck every Saturday morning and looked where I pointed and asked the right questions. Because you were the one who pushed back when I was wrong and changed your mind when you were wrong and never once made either of those things into a performance. He wrote, I told you once that land does not lie. People do. I am leaving you the thing that does not lie. He wrote, the document in this envelope is legal and binding and your parents cannot touch it. Call Morrison and Webb on Monday morning and ask for Catherine Webb. She is expecting your call. She has been expecting it for 11 months. He wrote, I am sorry I could not tell you in person. I am sorry I let you sit in that room and hear what you heard. I needed it to look like the whole story so your parents would not look for the rest of it. He wrote, you are the best argument I ever had, Joanna. I am proud of every single one of them. He wrote, love Grandpa. I folded the letter. I put it back in the envelope with the document. I sat in my car on Church Street in Nashville, Tennessee on a Wednesday morning in September while the season changed around me whether I was ready or not. Then I started the engine. I had a call to make. Not to my parents. Not to Marcus. To a woman named Catherine Webb at Morrison and Webb on 2nd Avenue. But that could wait until Monday. First I drove to the Brentwood house. Not to see my parents. They were still at Hartwell and Associates with Marcus signing things. I drove there because I needed to see it one more time. I parked across the street. I looked at the house my grandfather had built in 1974 with 2 friends and a dog named Duke. Then I drove to the first piece of land on the list. A field on the eastern edge of Williamson County that my grandfather had bought in 1987 for $4,200. I parked at the gate. I got out. I stood at the fence line the way he had taught me. Till. Looking. Taking the time to see before moving. The field was exactly what it had always been. 37 acres of Middle Tennessee land sitting there being exactly what it was. Not lying about a single thing. Monday morning came gray and quiet. I had spent the weekend doing what my grandfather had taught me to do before any important decision. I stopped moving and looked. I drove to 11 of the 14 parcels over Saturday and Sunday. Not all of them were accessible by road. 2 were deep field property that you could only see properly from the county road at the right angle in the right light. 1 was a ridge top in the southwestern corner of Williamson County that my grandfather had bought in 1994 for reasons he had never fully explained except to say, Joanna, someday that ridge is going to matter. I stood at the base of that ridge on a Sunday afternoon in September and looked up at the tree line and thought about a man in a gray coat on courthouse steps handing me an envelope and walking away without looking back. Joseph. My grandfather had paid a man he trusted to sit on those steps every Wednesday morning for 4 years, waiting for a morning that might never come or might come any Wednesday between then and whenever. 4 years of Wednesdays. That was how much my grandfather trusted his own plan. That was how much he trusted me to show up and receive it. Monday at 8:47 a.m. I called Morrison and Webb on 2nd Avenue. Catherine Webb answered herself. She was direct in the way that people are direct when they have been waiting for a call and are relieved it has finally come. She said, Ms. Davenport Cole, I have been expecting you. Your grandfather told me you would call on a Monday. He had known that too. He had known I would spend the weekend driving. I said, can we meet today? She said, I have been holding 11 o'clock open for 11 months. Her office was on the 4th floor of a building on 2nd Avenue with a window that looked out over the Cumberland River. Clean desk. 2 chairs across from it. A woman of maybe 58 with silver-streaked hair and reading glasses and the particular calm of someone who has spent a career holding other people's most important information and never once let it slip. She had a folder on her desk. Thick. Organized. Tabbed. She opened it and walked me through everything with the methodical care of someone who had prepared for this conversation many times in her head. The Earl James Davenport Irrevocable Land Trust had been established 11 months before his death. It was structured to transfer automatically to me upon his passing without going through probate. That was intentional. Nothing in the trust appeared in the estate that went through Hartwell and Associates. Nothing in the official will reference the trust. Two documents existed in entirely separate legal universes. My parents had known about the will. They had known nothing about the trust. Catherine said, "Your grandfather was very clear about the sequencing. He wanted the will read first. He wanted your parents to believe the story was complete," he said, and she looked at her notes. He said that if they knew about the land they would spend his last years fighting him about it, and he did not want to spend his last years fighting. I thought about that. An 81-year-old man managing the information his own family had access to in his final years so he could spend those years in peace. The particular loneliness of that landed somewhere quiet inside me. Catherine said, "He also said something else." She looked at her notes again. She said, "He told me to tell you that he was sorry he could not be more straightforward. He said you always preferred the direct approach and he hoped you would understand why this time he could not use it." I understood completely. Catherine walked me through the 14 parcels one by one. She had current valuations from a commercial real estate firm my grandfather had engaged 18 months before his death. He had been thorough even then. Even when he knew his time was shortening, he had been thorough. "I will not give you every number, but I will give you the total." 412 acres of Williamson County land valued at current market rates came to a number that required me to read it twice on Catherine Webb's clean desk on the 4th floor of a building on 2nd Avenue in Nashville. $14 million. Not what my grandfather had paid for it across 40 years of patient acquisition. What it was worth now. Because Williamson County had grown around every piece of land he had chosen with the patience of a man who understood that the best things are built slowly, and the right land in the right county in the right state at the right moment in history does not stay priced at what it cost in 1987 forever. The ridge top he bought in 1994 for reasons he never fully explained. A commercial real estate firm had valued it alone at $3.1 million because a developer had been trying to acquire property on that ridge for 2 years for a planned residential community and had been unable to assemble the necessary acreage because my grandfather had owned the key parcel for 30 years and it had been sitting in a trust with my name on it for 11 months. Someday that ridge is going to matter. He had known. Of course he had known. Catherine closed the folder. She folded her hands. She said, "Ms. Davenport Cole, I want to ask you something and you do not have to answer me today. What do you intend to do with the land?" I looked at the Cumberland River through her window. Gray September water moving at its own pace regardless of what was happening in offices above it. I said, "Some of it I will keep. The field on the eastern edge he bought in 1987. The ridge top. Maybe 2 or 3 others." She said, "And the rest?" I thought about my grandfather in his truck on Saturday mornings. Pointing. Explaining. Teaching me to read something that did not lie. I said, "The rest I will sell. But not to anyone who will put something on it that does not belong there." He was particular about land. I am going to be particular about who gets it. Catherine Webb looked at me for a moment. She said, "Your grandfather told me you would say something like that." I said, "What did he say exactly?" She smiled. The first real smile since I had walked in. She said, "He said Joanna will not just sell it to the highest bidder. She will sell it to the right person. She has never in her life done the easy thing when the right thing was available." I sat with that for a moment. 40 years of Saturday mornings in a pickup truck. 40 years of him watching and knowing and saying nothing until the envelope was ready and the man in the gray coat was positioned on the courthouse steps and the will had been read and the room had been cleared. He had seen me clearly for 40 years. And he had trusted what he saw. If you have ever had someone believe in you so quietly and so completely that you did not know the full size of it until they were gone, drop a comment right now. Tell me what time it is where you are. Tell me who that person was for you. 'Cause I want to know. My parents called on a Thursday evening, 11 days after the will reading, 9 days after my meeting with Catherine Webb. I had not called them. I had not returned the 2 messages my mother had left in the days immediately after the reading. Not out of cruelty. Out of the particular need for stillness that my grandfather had taught me. You cannot see something clearly while you are still moving. You have to stop first. I had been stopped for 11 days. I was ready. My mother called at 6:52 p.m. I was making dinner. Chicken and rice. The smell of it filling the kitchen of my house on Hillsborough Road in Nashville the way good smells should fill a kitchen in the early evening. She said, "Joanna, we need to talk." Her voice had a tightness I recognized. The particular register she used when she had information she had not expected to have and was not sure how to arrange herself around it. I said, "Okay, Mama. Talk." She said, "Catherine Webb's office called your father today. About some land trust. Something in your grandfather's name. They needed to notify the estate executor of an existing trust instrument. Standard legal procedure. Catherine had mentioned it would happen. A formality. The trust had to be formally acknowledged in relation to the estate even though it was entirely separate from it." My father got on the line. He had been there the whole time, I understood. Listening. He said, "Joanna, what is this land trust?" His voice was different from my mother's. Where she was tight, he was flat. The flatness of a man trying to stay controlled over something that was pulling hard at the underside of his control. I turned down the stove. I said, "Grandpa established an irrevocable land trust 11 months before he died. He named me as the sole beneficiary. Transferred to me automatically when he passed." Silence. My mother said, "What land?" I said, 14 parcels in Williamson County. 412 acres total. The silence that followed was different from the previous one. Fuller. Kind of silence that is not empty but is instead packed with things nobody is saying yet. My father said, "We did not know about any land trust." His voice had shifted now. The flatness was cracking at the edges, and underneath it was something older and rawer that I had only heard from him a few times in my life. I said, "I know you didn't." He said, "How long have you known?" I said, 11 days. My mother said, "Joanna, why didn't you tell us?" I thought about how to answer that. The honest answer was that I had needed 11 days of stillness before I could have this conversation without it becoming something I did not want it to become. That I had needed to drive to 11 pieces of land and stand at fence lines and ridge tops and look at things that did not lie before I could talk to people who had. I said, "Because I needed time to understand it myself first." My father said, "What is it worth?" The directness of that question landed exactly the way he intended it to land. Not as curiosity. As an accounting. As the question of a man who had just understood that a story he thought was finished had a chapter he had not been shown. I said, "Daddy, I think you already know that what Grandpa left Marcus was what you asked him to leave Marcus. And what he left me was what he decided to leave me. Those are two different things, and I do not think either of them needs to be explained to the other." Silence. My mother said, "That is not fair, Joanna. We were trying to help Marcus. You have always been capable of taking care of yourself. Marcus needed," I said, "Mama." Stop. She stopped. I said, "I know you were trying to help Marcus. I know he needed help. I am not angry about what you asked Grandpa to do. I understand it." I turned the stove back up slightly. The rice needed another 4 minutes. I said, "What I want you to understand is that Grandpa made his own decision. Separately. In private. With his own lawyer. He did not tell you because he knew what would happen if he did, and he did not want to spend his last years in that conversation." My father said, "He should have told us." Something about that sentence, the particular entitlement of it, the assumption that Earl Davenport owed his son an accounting of every decision he made about land he had spent 40 years acquiring with his own money, landed in me somewhere that had been patient for a very long time. I said, "Daddy, he built that company from nothing. He bought that land acre by acre for 40 years. He never asked anyone's permission for any of it. Why would he have asked permission for this?" Silence. I said, "He loved you. He left you and Marcus the house and the accounts because your family asked him to and because he wanted you to be taken care of. But the land was his. Every piece of it. And he decided what to do with it the same way he decided everything. Quietly. Carefully. Without needing anyone to agree with him first. My father did not say anything. My mother said, "Joanna, what are you going to do with it?" Some of it I was keeping. The field on the eastern edge. The ridge top. A few others that I was not ready to name yet because naming them felt like a private thing between me and the man who had pointed at them through a truck window on Saturday mornings. The rest I was selling. Carefully. To the right people. I said, I am going to take care of it the way he took care of it. That is all I can tell you right now. My father was quiet for a long time. Then he said he always did love you best. He said it without the anger I had expected. Without the bitterness. He said it the way a man says something true that has cost him a long time to be able to say. And I want to tell you what I felt when he said it, 'cause it was not triumph. It was not satisfaction. It was not any of the things you might expect to feel when the person who laughed at you in a conference room 11 days ago admits out loud what you have known your whole life. It was something closer to grief. Grief for a father and a grandfather who had spoken different languages for 60 years and never found the right translator. Grief for a man who had interpreted 40 years of Saturday mornings in a truck as proof that he was loved less instead of proof that love looks different in different people, and sometimes you have to learn the language before you can hear what is being said. I said, Daddy, he loved you. He just loved you in the only way he knew how. And I think somewhere you knew that even when it was hard to feel it. My father did not answer. My mother said, we should have handled things differently, Joanna. The will. How we approached your grandfather. All of it. I said, yes. You should have. She said, I am sorry. I said, I know, Mama. Chicken was done. The rice was done. Kitchen smelled like something good and warm and entirely mine. I said, I have to go. I will call you this weekend. I hung up. I stood at my stove. Side on Hillsborough Road. The evening was doing what September evenings in Nashville do. Cooling slowly. Deciding finally to become autumn. I served myself a plate. I sat at my kitchen table. And I ate dinner in the particular piece of a woman who has just had the hardest conversation and come through the other side of it still standing exactly where she intended to stand. I kept 5 parcels. The field on the eastern edge of Williamson County that my grandfather had bought in 1987 for $4,200. The ridge top in the southwestern corner. A creek bottom property near Leaper's Fork that he had bought in 1999 and never once talked about except to drive me past it on October morning and say, Joanna, listen. You can hear the water from the road. I had stood at that fence line on a Sunday afternoon during my 11 days of stillness and listened. He was right. You could hear the water from the road. The remaining 9 parcels I sold over the following 14 months. Not quickly. Not to the highest bidder. Carefully. The way my grandfather had bought them. One went to a conservation land trust that was assembling a wildlife corridor in the southern part of the county. My grandfather would have approved of that. One went to a family from Murfreesboro who wanted 40 acres to build a home and farm properly and had been priced out of every other option they had looked at for 2 years. I sold it to them for less than market value. My grandfather had done the same thing twice that I knew of. The ridge top developer approached me 4 times in the first 6 months. 4 times I said no. Not because the number was wrong. Because my grandfather had bought that ridge for a reason he never fully explained, and I had stood at the base of it on a Sunday afternoon and looked up at the tree line and decided that whatever that reason was, it deserved more consideration than a residential development could give it. On the 5th approach, the developer sent a different representative. A woman named Sandra Okafor. 40-something. Direct handshake. She sat across from me at a coffee shop on 12th Avenue South and said, Ms. Davenport Cole, I want to understand what you are looking for before I tell you what we are offering. 'Cause I have a feeling the previous conversations missed something important. I liked her immediately. She was right. They had missed something important. I said, that ridge has been in my family for 30 years. My grandfather bought it when nobody else was looking at it, and he held it when everyone else was selling around him. I need whoever develops it to understand that they are not just buying land. They are buying 30 years of patience and intention, and the development needs to reflect that. Sandra looked at me for a moment. She said, what would that look like to you? I told her. Smaller footprint than they had planned. More green space preserved. The tree line on the western edge untouched. A commitment to use local contractors where possible. She took notes. She came back 2 weeks later with a revised proposal. It was not everything I had asked for. It was enough. I signed in February. The ridge top closed at $2.9 million. $200,000 less than the original offer. The $200,000 was the price of the tree line. I did not regret a single dollar of it. Marcus called me in March. 7 months after the will reading. 6 months after our parents had told him about the trust. He called on a Tuesday evening at 7:30 p.m. and I answered because he was my brother and whatever had happened in that conference room he was still my brother. He said, "Joe, can I talk to you?" His voice was different from the version I had grown up with. Quieter. The particular quiet of someone who has had a period of time to sit with something and has come out the other side of it changed. I said, "Talk." He said, "I did not know about the land trust. I want you to know that. What Mom and Dad asked Grandpa to do with the will, I knew about that. I should not have let them. I knew it was not right and I let them do it anyway because I needed the help and I told myself you would be fine." He stopped. He said, "You were always fine." That is what I told myself. Joanna is always fine. She does not need it the way I need it. I said, "Marcus." He said, "I know. I know that was wrong. I am not asking you to tell me it was okay. I am just telling you what I told myself." Outside on Hillsborough Road a car passed slowly. Its headlights moved across the ceiling of my living room and kept going. I said, "You were struggling. I understand that. What I needed was for someone to tell me the truth instead of making a decision about what I could handle without asking me." He said, "You are right." I said, "I know I am." He made a sound. Half laugh. The version of Marcus's laugh that had always been the real one underneath the agreeable performed version. He said, "Grandpa knew you were right about everything too. He just liked arguing with you." Something loosened in my chest. I said, "He liked arguing with me because I was the only one who argued back properly." Marcus said, "I know. I always knew that." We talked for 43 minutes. Not about the land. Not about the money. About our grandfather. About Saturday mornings in the truck. About the workshop in Brentwood and the way he smelled like sawdust and coffee and the particular quiet of men who spend their lives making things that last. Marcus had his own memories. Different from mine. Smaller in some ways. But his. Earl Davenport had loved his grandson too. Just differently. Just in the language that Marcus had not yet learned to receive. When we hung up I sat in my living room for a long time. The 5 parcels I had kept were exactly where they had always been. Sitting there being exactly what they were. Not lying about a single thing. I visit the field on the eastern edge of Williamson County every year on my grandfather's birthday. September 14th. I park at the gate the way he taught me. I get out. I stand at the fence line and I stop moving and I look. 37 acres of Middle Tennessee land. The same creek running along the south edge that was running there when he bought it in 1987 for $4,200. The same tree line on the north edge. The same particular quality of light in the late afternoon that makes everything look like it has been there forever and intends to stay. I bring a thermos of coffee. I stand at that fence for as long as it takes. Some years it takes 20 minutes. Some years it takes an hour. I am never entirely sure what I am waiting for until it arrives. A shift in the light. The sound of the creek finding its way over a particular rock. The feeling of being completely still in a place that is also completely still and understanding for a moment that this is what he was trying to give me every Saturday morning in that truck. Not the land. The way of looking at it. The ability to stop moving and see. A cream-colored envelope handed to me on courthouse steps by a man in a gray coat who walked away without looking back. 4 years of Wednesdays he had sat on those steps. 4 years of trust in a plan and a granddaughter and the particular kind of love that does not announce itself but shows up at 6 a.m. when you need it and leaves without waiting to be thanked. I did not do it for revenge. I did it because of who I am. Because of who he made me. On 30 years of Saturday mornings in a pickup truck pointing at land that did not lie. Drop a comment right now and tell me what time is it where you are tonight. And tell me, did someone in your life love you so quietly you did not understand the size of it until they were gone? 'Cause that is the kind of love that changes you. And I want to know who gave it to you. If this story moved you, if you felt that courthouse step or that fence line or that 43 minutes on the phone with a brother finding his way back, share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe to Honor Unveiled. We will see you in the next one.